Bah.
Nana, you may take it away.
Thank you, Terence. All right. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar series session themed private sector viewpoints on the state of fertilizer in Africa. This is a series of webinars that have been organized by AFAB based on the backbone of the PPD, the public-private dialogue sessions that we held earlier this year. Today's theme or today's session will be focused on soil health in Africa, enhancing fertilizer impact and sustainable agriculture. To support me in this presentation, we have a group of panelists, so I'd encourage them to kindly turn on their cameras as we start. Okay. Thank you. So we have Dr. Shami. So Dr. Shami, can you kindly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be part of this very critical discussion. My name is Shemi Singore. I'm the Director for Research and Development at the African Plant Nutrition Institute. I'm a soil scientist by background and currently supporting our continental outreach of programs. Just a brief overview of APNI. APNI was established in 2019 to address research, extension, and capacity gaps in plant nutrition on the continent and to deliver knowledge that is critical for improving nutrient management as a key catalyst for sustainable agricultural development. So our focus is very much on sustainable nutrient management to improve soil fertility, soil health, and then also improve resilience to climate change. Our headquarters are in Bangui in Morocco, but we work continentally, and our continental reach is supported by our regional offices in Ivory Coast and in Kenya as well. I'm very excited to be part of the conversation in the next 1.5 hours.
Thank you, Dr. Shami. So I would invite Dr. Abebe Daka to also introduce himself.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Abebe Farao from Ethiopia. I'm currently serving as IFDC Country Director. I have a background in soil science. I studied soil and water conservation and then had master's in soil science and had PhD in geography and sustainable development. I have, over the past 20 years, I've served a number of NGOs, including ILRI, USAID, UNDP at different positions. I'm currently serving as country director. Just a brief overview of IFDC. IFDC is a non-for-profit organization. We're like research and development. We try to promote technologies, practices to farmers to increase productivity and reduce poverty. We have now presence in over like 22 countries. We have a vision which says a healthy soil for healthy plants and animals, and for sustainable ecosystem. I'm happy to join you, and thank you for offering us this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daka. Last but not the least, I would invite Dr. Liesel Rozanoff to also introduce herself.
Thanks, Dona Aisha, and also to AFAB for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here, along with Shami and Abebe. So I'm also a soil scientist by training, based in South Africa, and I work as an independent agricultural science and policy consultant. So I started out with 10 years at the Agricultural Research Council here in South Africa, and from there started consulting with 2 years with the Global Soil Partnership Secretariat at the Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome. And they really built an interest in the link between science policy in terms of sustainable soil and land management, and also looking at how to get that to impact on the ground with land users. And a particular interest has been what are the solutions in Africa in terms of improving soil management. And a key thing I realized was that I didn't need to have all the answers, but I just need to be part of a process of interacting with so many Africans that have incredible expertise and knowledge and ideas, and just be part of a process to put that together. So for the last 2 years, especially, I've been working with the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa as part of preparations for the upcoming Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit, which will be held early in the new year, or Q1 or Q2 next year, specifically to support the development of a Soil Initiative for Africa framework as a long-term framework for Africa to address improvements in soil health. And I got to know Shami a lot in this process when he also supported the development of the action plan for the first 10 years. So very happy to be part of this discussion, and always happy to also receive information from others and their experiences to bring into this process. Over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liesel. Just to highlight, today's session is going to highlight and also drive discussions around the pivotal role of soil health in the maximization of the impact of fertilizer towards achieving sustainable agriculture in Africa. As you can see, each of our experts that have been selected have played a critical role in the current preparation towards the Soil Summit that is going to be held next year. Now, I'll move quickly to housekeeping, and then I'll move quickly to housekeeping just so we can kickstart as soon as possible. Today's session is going to be a 1.5 hour session full of engagement and also quite insightful information. I would encourage you all to kindly mute your mics and also turn off your videos except the speakers. For general questions and comments, you can use the chat function. Each participant is encouraged to share or introduce themselves in the comment section. And and for questions, we have a Q&A tab in the function box on your right hand side. Please share your comments. I'll briefly outline the program for today. We would start with the introductions, which is what I've been doing in the last few minutes. Would have a first presentation by Dr. Shami that is going to be looking at or focused on exploring the pivotal relationship between soil health and fertilizer, and looking with a focus on the impact in Africa. The second presentation will be by Dr. Daka. This is only focused on the promotion of soil health through policy, investments, and farmer engagements. And last but not the least, would have Dr. Liesel also talking about enhancing soil health for resilient agriculture in Africa. We would have then a Q&A session where I would read out some of the questions that you've posted in the questions and comments section. I would encourage that you kindly please direct, or if you're putting together your questions, please try to highlight which speaker you'll be targeting. And then also we'll give the speakers an opportunity to have a closing remark, and then we can then move forward. So thank you very much. On that note, I would hand over to Dr. Shami, who would be giving us a short presentation on exploring the pivotal role in the pivotal relationship between soil health and fertilizer impact in Africa. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much again. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this conversation, and thanks again to AFAP for inviting me to be part of the panel today. I'm going to highlight in the next quarter of an hour some key important issues relating to the relationship between soil health and fertilizer impacts in the African context. And the debate, the discussion on fertilizer and soil health normally takes polarizing sides. There's a school of thought that associate fertilizer with unhealthy soils, But I want to illustrate, in my talk today, that there is actually a beneficial association between fertilizer and health and soil health, and these don't have to be mutually exclusive issues. And when fertilizer is managed well, it can actually enable and enhance, soil health. So that's really the key line of my presentation today. But to start off, I just want to put the issue of plant nutrition and soil health in the broader context of African agriculture sustainability. From a large part of the work we do at IPNI and with our network of partners, we do recognize that at the apex of the multiple challenges that African agriculture encounters is very much the issue of low and inappropriate nutrient management. It's not just about fertilizer, but all the other sources of nutrients. They are actually in low supply, and in many cases, when they are used, they are not used appropriately. What this has translated into over many decades is prolonged nutrient depletion that comes with a very large cost tab of somewhere in the region of $4 to $10 billion. And this is, I think, very conservative. And with many years of low and inadequate nutrient application, a large part of the land in Africa is now considered to be degraded, and the cost of degradation due to many loss of productivity, but also other soil functions that provide important provisioning and non-provisioning ecosystem services actually impose a cost that is in excess of $60 billion. And as I'm going to highlight in my talk today, it's not just about the current challenges that we face with land degradation, but also the implications for fertilizer response that tend to be highly diminished when soils become degraded. And then in the broader context of environmental sustainability, what starts as low and inappropriate nutrient management actually balloons into extensive agricultural systems that accelerate the loss of carbon and biodiversity, and then also the loss of essential ecosystem services, then elevated emissions of greenhouse gases that aggravate the impact of climate change, and that also limit the adaptation capacity to climate change. And at the human level, this then is exhibited through low livelihood qualities and some of the socioeconomic and development outcomes that have remained lagging in sub-Saharan Africa. To overcome this vicious cycle, attention has to go to appropriate nutrient management. But this has to be done not just focusing on fertilizer or nutrients, but looking at the broader farmer-centric integrated soil fertility and crop and water management interventions that ensure that we build soil health, not just looking at productivity, but soil health, but also ensuring that we are also building resilience to climate change and also capitalizing on the mitigation potential of African agriculture to climate change. And Africa is a very broad continent, and we need to also be very context-specific in our interventions and also pay very close attention to optimizing investments and reducing the investment risks of farmers to ensure that they can adopt technologies that enable them to improve nutrient management. So in a way, this summarizes the context, but also highlights a key part of the storyline that I'm going to cover today. Then I want to then move into highlighting the core processes that underlie some of the issues that are related to low nutrient use with the consequent land degradation, which then also feeds back into diminishing the responsiveness of soils to management, including to fertilizer. So we see that the relationship between soil health and fertilizer tends to be very iterative. While nutrient use and inappropriate nutrient use is a negative consequence on soil health also result in a negative feedback mechanism that then also reduces the response of nutrients to fertilizer. And I'm going to illustrate that in the next slides. Work we conducted in a case study I'm showing now, this is work done in Zimbabwe, looking at a wide range of soils, sandy soils and clay soils under low input systems. I've just highlighted the challenge that we face with low nutrient application. What we observed from chronosequences of land clearance comparing organic matter in uncultivated soils with fields that have been cultivated with minimum addition of fertilizer for various periods of time, what we observed is that we go through a very rapid soil organic matter loss phase in the initial years of cultivation. So within the first 10 years of cultivation, when farmers grow crops, and this was a maize-based systems with inadequate application of nutrients, it triggered very rapid depletion of soil organic matter. And I think it's also important for me to highlight that organic matter is one of the indicators that is closely associated with soil health due to the multiple functions that organic matter plays in the soils. So as part of my presentation today, I'll consider soil organic matter to be synonymous with soil health, although there are other aspects of soil health that are not necessarily encompassed by organic matter. So this rapid depletion of organic matter is pervasive in large parts of the continent. There are similar studies that showed very similar results. And the key driving force behind the rapid depletion of organic matter is essentially the low productivity that results in low carbon inputs that triggers soil organic carbon depletion. But an added dimension of the soil organic matter losses is actually attributed to increased erosion that also results in the loss of the topsoil, which is richer in soil organic matter. So what happens over time is a new equilibrium is reached, which is between 40 to 50% soil organic carbon of the initial levels under the native vegetation. And in large part of those range of 50 to 40%, soils become degraded and they are not able to fully provide the soil ecosystem services that are associated with soil health. And what we observed very interestingly is when we compared the low input systems where farmers were using minimal fertilizer with a commercial farming systems where farmers use more fertilizers, produce more biomass, and were retaining residues in the field, they were actually able to maintain 50% more carbon in the soils. And this was actually a major effect of input of fertilizer supporting higher productivity and then providing the biomass that could be retained in the soil. So there's a very clear positive relationship between investment in fertilizer with improving productivity and then also enabling sustainable soil health management. And what is the implication of some of the soil organic matter changes for crop productivity? What we also found is in the initial years of cultivation, comparing sandy soil and clay soil response to fertilizer, within the initial 10 years of cultivation, we were able to get higher fertilizer responses and significant and viable yield responses in both agronomic and economic sense. Yields were higher in clay soils because of their high soil fertility status, but nutrient responses were much higher in sandy soils because of their lower nutrient status. So when soil organic matter is maintained above certain threshold levels, we can maintain viable agronomic responses to investments in fertilizer. In this case, it was nitrogen. But as we continue under the trajectory of land degradation and depletion of organic matter, after 20 years, we recognize that yield declined and yield responses also declined. Because as soil health declines, there are many multiple constraints that limit response to nutrients. And in sandy soils that we focused on, they were more susceptible to degradation to a level where response to basic nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizer application became diminished and actually insignificant. And that actually resulted in the non-responsive soil status that is very characterized by inadequate responses to fertilizer. And then on the clay soils, they were more resilient, and immediate responses to fertilizer could actually be derived under those conditions. So the issue of soil health and interaction with fertilizer is very context specific and source specific as well, and we should be able to address some of the source specific dynamics to generate specific solutions targeted to those situations. My colleague Pauline, who's part of the participants in this meeting, synthesized this in a framework of soil health degradation and restoration. This is very much mirroring what I presented. And in the initial phase of degradation, where you have both yields and soil degradation happening, you could still be able to increase crop productivity. That's the purple line, the dotted purple line in the first phase of degradation, while soil health can be restored more gradually. So you could actually invest in fertilizer to increase productivity and then retain some of the residues and improve the overall productivity of the system. But in this last stage, that's the third point of restoration, crop responses become diminished, and you actually need to invest first in soil health restoration before you can get meaningful agronomic response to fertilizers. So this is a scenario that plays out in very different contexts in the African landscape, and we need very targeted investments in different restoration capacities, especially in degraded soils, before we can actually get meaningful responses to fertilizer application. So very specific context for targeting fertilizers. And just wanted to also highlight that a large part of the soil constraints in Sub-Saharan Africa are dominated by chemical degradation, which tends to start off the degradation processes. It tends to happen with the progression from chemical, biological, and physical degradation. And when you have all the types of degradation occurring concurrently, then you have very complex systems that then take more time to restore. So chemical degradation tends to be dominant, but I just wanted to highlight that low nutrient reserves tend to dominate a large part of the soil chemical degradation. A large part of our research over the last 20 or 30 decades have helped us to come up with the integrated soil fertility management concept, which recognizes responsive and non-responsive soils. So soil organic ISFM is recognized or defined as a set of soil fertility management practices that includes fertilizer, organic inputs, and improved seed varieties, but also combined with the knowledge for adapting to local conditions. And that must be also supported by best agronomic practices. So in non-responsive soils, you get suboptimal responses to fertilizer and improved seed, and you actually need to invest in organic matter and other complementary technologies like lime to get significant responses. But on the more responsive sites, you can actually get significant responses to fertilizer and improved seed varieties, whilst you need complementary technologies to maximize the agronomic efficiencies of those inputs. And then other local adaptation processes will give additional benefit, and this includes water management or other socioeconomic decision support that help farmers to adapt technologies to their local conditions. Then before I conclude, I just wanted to also highlight that within the ISFM context, fertilizer management is very crucial. And at APNI, we promote the 4R nutrient stewardship, which is a core principle that provides the science and practice for improving overall sustainability of nutrient management, considering the right source, right rate, right time, right place of nutrient management. And in large parts where fertilizer results in soil health degradation is because soil fertilizer has not been managed appropriately. But with 4R, we put a key focus on ensuring sustainable fertilizer management to ensure environmental, economic, and social sustainability. Then my last slide is to highlight that there are benefits of fertilizer beyond the direct impact on crop production. And fertilizer globally has actually resulted in about 50 to 60% increases in crop production. So without fertilizer, we can actually remove 60% of the current agricultural output that is produced now. And what that has done is contribute to sparing of land that would have been needed to feed the global population. And it is actually estimated that the increase in crop productivity associated with fertilizer has resulted in sparing 2.4 billion hectares of agricultural land globally. And this actually helps to preserve natural ecosystems and support soil health management in the broader context, just beyond agricultural land use. And Lizelle has indicated in her introduction that we have been part of the process to support the Africa Union to develop the African Field and Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan. And this really encompasses a large part of what I was talking about, recognizing the need for ensuring that farmers use the right amounts of organic and inorganic fertilizers and manage them right. And then also ensuring that we have the necessary policy, investment, and finance and markets that enable farmers to invest in fertilizer, but also looking at the institutional and human capacity for enhancing sustainable soil health management. But then, more importantly, the outcome area of 3 of the action plan actually recognizes the need for greater efficiency, resilience, and sustainable use of mineral and organic fertilizer inputs to enhance soil health interventions. And I think a large part of the key data I've presented shows that with sustainable fertilizer management, we can actually enable soil health to be improved, but also soil health positively feeding back on increasing the overall efficiency of the system. So I just want to conclude by thanking you and pointing out that we have a special issue of Growing Africa, our magazine, that captures a large part of the interaction between fertilizer and soil health in a series of publications that I would like to draw your attention to for some of further reading and further review of some of the important aspects of fertilizer and soil health. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shami, for this interesting perspective. Throughout the discussion or your presentation, one of the things that kept coming to me was the fact that indeed it is important, or it has been important, for us to move the conversation or the dime of the conversation away from just looking at fertilizer as a single unit to promoting productivity, but then to also look very closely at the integrated soil fertility management as the solution, or as one of the solutions that we would need to promote under this new agenda for African productivity. I'm quite happy to see the 4Rs quite strongly, because this is one of the things that we've also been working on as AFAP, especially at the agro-dealer level, trying to promote the 4Rs at the agro-dealer level, because as we know, agro-dealers sort of serve as the main interface between the farmers and inputs. So in trying to promote this opportunity for farmers to increase the efficiency that they get from fertilizer use. So it's quite interesting. And to go back to your last slide in terms of where the focus of the discussion is, I think this presentation, the next presentation, also pretty much touches on those key discussions around investments and also human capital, and also where the focus of the discussion should be. So on that note, I would invite Dr. Abebe to also make his presentation. Thank you. whilst we wait for Dr. Abebe to start, I'd introduce myself. I was very I moved from assuming that everybody knew who I was. My name is Nana Aisha Mohammed. I'm the West Africa Implementation Lead and Ghana Country Manager for AFAP. And most recently have also been serving as the West Africa Lead for the Sustain Africa Initiative.
Dr. Daka, you can please proceed with your presentation.
Great, okay. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm trying to go through a couple of slides just to see how we can promote soil health policy for investment and farmers' engagement. A couple of things which I would like to say before going into the slides is we all agree that soil health is a concept which is now taking attention of not only researchers and development actions, but also even key decision makers. And when we say soil health, we are referring to function of a soil to serve plants, animals, and provide ecosystem. And with increasing soil health, there is an increase in soil organic matter, there is increase in carbon sequestration, there is increase in productivity, income. There is even a building in capacity of resilience. With soil health increase, we also perceive that there is less degradation and less cost. We basically want to link like soil health with policy in this slide, but by policy, I'm now referring, I would like to give like a contextual understanding. I'm referring to acts, policies, various documents which help promote soil health practices and technology. So by that, it may refer to framework or action plan or to any proclamation or guideline for that matter, any standard. So that may refer to anything that could be linked with national policies, regional, or even institutional one. So we will look at how soil health policy can help investment, how it can also promote farmers' engagement. But by investment, we not only expect like smallholder farmers to have their own resources to make use of their resources, but also we expect investment from governments, even from international NGOs, civil societies.
Apologies, Dr. Abebe. Can you
Yes.
kindly go through the slides so that everybody can see, because we are still stuck on the first slide.
Yes, yeah, I'm still on the first. So I'm just trying to give, an overview on the slides. So I'm trying to give you like a perspective from sub-Saharan African, where we often find more literature focusing on that. With this overview, this is a slide which we want to try to start the issues from challenges, which has already been also indicated by Dr. Zingore. We all know that there is land degradation, which is vast, extensive, occurring in every continent, and global cost is too much. The annual cost is estimated to be as much as like 230 billion per year globally. So this accounts to some percent of like the global GDP. These are some of the evidence which we can see from researches undertaken by IFPRI scientists. And the cost, this cost can has also some implication for Sub-Saharan Africa. And we share 26% of the above cost. So you can imagine with degradation in land, we mean also decline in soil quality, fertility. So if we even break down into smaller pieces, the costs from soil fertility management would be too much. So one of the research documents which we can see with poor land management practices on maize, rice, and wheat in Africa. The cost estimate is like $50 billion per year. So if we think of like the whole land mass, you can imagine how severe it is. I know for those of you who have gone through soil literatures, the idea of nutrient depletion has well been recorded back in 90s, and Professor Eric Smalek and his colleagues from the Netherlands University, Wageningen University, have also documented the depletion of nutrients, especially in sub-Saharan context. And today our farmers use small amount of fertilizer, like the average figure we see is 20 kilogram per hectare of nutrients. And this is like too small compared to global standard, which goes close to 130, 140. So this basically shows both on supply and demand side, there is really a distress on fertilizer sector. So we are undersupplied. Farmers are using small amounts. The technologies are not well promoted. The demand is growing high. And on demand, there are really increasing demand for better nutrient, be it for mineral or organic fertilizer, to meet, challenges of climate change. So if we have all these challenges, all what we need is one instrument is a soil health policy. We need a soil health policy, and we know we have institutes who can, analyze the need, come with policy and so on. And if we try to see, there are different kinds of documents which we can see, which can help, investment, promotion of soil health practices on agricultural land. At global level, we can see different conventions: Convention of Biodiversity, Climate Change, even United Nations Convention for Combating Desertification, even the FAO Soil Charter. Those things can, in some way, will tell who should do what and what role goes to whom, and how we should protect, preserve, and sustain our environment. And part of it is the soil. We also have, at regional level, different framework initiatives. And if you have listened to our to today's presenter, I think some of the framework initiatives are to be has already been formulated by like FARA, AU, and others. Now, all these initiatives, roadmaps, in one way or another, will help us, protect soil, promote, improve land management, and so on. We can go through different literature and see that different countries have different laws, policy documents, different acts, action plan, and so on. So I just have briefly tried to, show some. Well, what we understand is there are already policies. Well, we don't say all policies are really focused on soil health, but we often have policies focused on land resources, natural resource management, and some on soils. But still, some documents at national level or institutional level could be missing. Say, institutional, if you look at, say, African Development Bank, you can have some policies focused specifically on land and soils. Yet, do we have policies focused on soil health? Those are the things which may come up. Apart from the issues at country level, we can ask also similar question. Now, having seen briefly this topic, what I see is it's not merely the lack of documents, it's the lack of materials, yet it's the lack of a means to enforce the law. We often formulate policies at a higher level, and we often use top-down approach, but like using bottom-up approach, undertaking the monitoring evaluation practice would be quite important. So these are some of the focus areas for some of us. So I hope many of the audience over here would see where we have to focus. In the coming slides, I would like to take you through how governments, non-governmental partners, and private sectors would invest. But equally, what we see is when we look at sub-Saharan African, investment in agriculture is very low. In fact, when it comes to agriculture, you have some percent per country, there is a GDP percent contribution. In fact, some regulations like CAD would enforce governments to invest some amount, at least 6% of their GDP to agriculture. But still, when you go down, if you see investment in land, it will be higher. But when you specifically look, although there could be scarcity of data, investment in soil will be less, and more specifically, investment in soil health could be, quite difficult to track. But these are areas where we need to have data. But the truth is, government investment in agriculture and in agriculture research and development is too small, and we really invest small. And if we see even the trend, there is a declining trend in sub-Saharan Africa. Say back in 2006, the GDP contribution was like 0.59, but today, as a whole, investment in agriculture and research is close to 0.51%. So over the past 3 decades, even some of the study conducted by FAO shows a decline in investment, public investment as a whole. But this is a key area because if you have heard of Dr. Zingore, he was talking of institutions, capacity building, and if we need innovations, these are areas where we have to focus. So in sub-Saharan Africa in general, donor funding accounts for largest share of investment in natural resource management, and that holds true to soil health in some aspect. But still, governments try to do different effort, and I would like to take your attention to like investment in, agriculture, more specifically in subsidies. I hope you all know, there are pros and cons of subsidies. But if we look at input subsidies, if they are quite smart, if they target, poor farmers, if they are inclusive, it can address larger proportion of people. And if the inputs are like diverse, if it focus on soils, seeds, and even other agro inputs, the success in agriculture would be higher. Now, if you look at this table, it just tries to show you how governments undertake different input subsidy. But the table over here will show you how, say, the third column show you how the Mali government has taken investment in input subsidy from 2005 onwards. So this subsidy includes, among other things, fertilizer. So voucher is one option, but in-kind distributions are also there. Now, what are the policy issues over here? When we design policies, if it targets like poor farmers or households, as indicated over here, that could be quite good, and it really increases production, productivity, and address really the poverty we talk in a broader sense. So I know different organizations, including IFDC, has experience in input voucher system, and recently IFDC has been investing in Nigeria in input voucher systems, and these are like ways where we can, promote investment. When inputs are there, I think the overall combined effect for production would be greater. If we look other options investment, we don't only leave to government, but there is an option also for donors to work alongside with government. And this is a table which tries to show how investment is done in sustainable land management. And different countries, I'm just showing you a table briefly to show how different countries contribute to sustainable land management. So if there is investment in sustainable land management, there is a possibility for increase in soil carbon, there is an increase in soil health, there is an increase in soil biodiversity. So different governments, depending on the policies that have investment percent share they allocate for agriculture, there is a difference in variation. So we see over here, according to NICA 2050, the variation goes from small percent, 5% to like maximum of 83%. In one way or another, this is a table which tries to show how government itself expends part of their GDP, part of their investment to improvement of soil quality, improvement of soil fertility. I think a point which I should mention in connection with this is if you look at some of the investments, say through World Bank, focusing on sustainable land management, governments are obliged to contribute some part of their budget to. So these are issues which will also help promote soil health. In this connection, it is also good for us also to see how governments should formulate their policy. When we say policy, it may focus at national, regional level, I mean, like Africa level, continental, or when we say policy, it is of different types. Some are like focused on research, where it promotes investment in research. So in that case, like countries can have soil information services, can provide, different soil data, soil maps, and so on. There are policies which also focus on extension, where awareness creations can be promoted to wide range of farmers, millions of farmers. So equally, financial policies would also help, promote soil health. In this regard, we are referring to different options. It could be like incentives in connection with subsidies. It could be tax exemptions for technologies. If there is someone who promotes, say, sustainable land management practice or ISFM, integrated soil fertility practice, then there has to be exemptions for tax. There has to be tax exemption to promote the technology. That's how we can promote soil health. So there are different, practices, programs. Not to mention all. We can indicate the cost sharing programs, like if there are food for work, cash for work. In many of these programs, the public also contributes in some way, and the investors or the government or private sector would invest another portion, but in one way or another, it will promote soil health practices. So scaling up these practices would, fall under the role of government, and the private investment has to go also. Even promoting private investment with some incentives, tax reductions would also be one way. By the way, soil health investment can be promoted in many ways. We don't only limit to, technologies, financial options, but even, tenure issue, land ownership is also another thing. So encouraging investment on communal land could be one thing. If communities or individual households are, have entitlement, then that would encourage to improve soil health. I think many of these things goes with, role of even civil society. I don't know, promoting ISFM, integrated soil fertility management, based goes well with the capacity of institutions like IFDC, and many of NGOs, non-governmental organizations are working on that. And we should then relate not only to soil, but anything that goes investment related with land also promotes soil health. For example, if there is, say, protection of environment, be it a forest area, park, or protected area, and so on, that also in one way or another promotes the soil health. So basically, when we talk about investment, it's actually good to see if there is like a market, if there is a room for that. And I would like to take your attention to the next two slides. The first would show you the fertilizer market in Africa, focusing on the mineral fertilizer. And the second will show fertilizer market, or the organic one. So here, we as a soil scientists, or as a reader in soil science, we don't only think fertilizer, mineral fertilizer is the only solution, but we also think organic is necessary. So a combination of that would address, issue of promoting soil health. So policies has to focus on that. In this slide, what we try to understand is the market, fertilizer markets in Africa is growing, from like, relative speaking, from 5 billion USD in current market to like, to 10 billion in the coming years by 2025. So by then it means we may need as much as like 60 million tons of fertilizer per year. Some of the companies which I should like to mention to you is like OCP is now investing in 16 countries. They have presence in 16 countries. They are working on production of phosphate fertilizers. So they have a number of blending plants. And surprisingly, they have what is called OCP School Lab. So this is a case where they try to promote soil testing, how they increase farmers' awareness, how they make use of soils test, crop test, and then promote importance of fertilizers. And this shows in a way how a private sector can promote a soil health. So policies which has to be designed by governments has to encourage private investment in this case. Having talked about mineral fertilizer, I should also indicate to you that there are different initiatives. One is African Fertilizer Financing Mechanism, which is promoted by African Development Bank. Today, a lot has been invested. As of last year, 11.4 million was invested. But I know there are a couple of governments who have committed their money, like Nigeria, Tanzania. But equally, we also are expecting other governments to commit their money so that this financing mechanisms and facility would grow. Quite surprisingly, we also see the northern government from the north, some investment from NORAD, USAID, and that also shows, how some institutes are focused toward the soil health. And in fact, what we understand from this slide is the market is growing bigger. That's true to organic fertilizer. Like today, roughly speaking, if we look at some of the web pages, I haven't used IFDC documents, but I have taken this information from Mordo Intelligence webpage. This is a table figure which tries to show us a growing trend, a forecast in African organic market. So there is an increasing trend in the market. So this shows an option for investment. So I have tried to look at the document they have, and there are like top 5 companies investing now in Africa. But still, in every country, we have different small and medium enterprises that are emerging one. So these are areas where civil societies and government has to support small and medium enterprises, group of farmers to promote soil health, and policies has to focus on that. So perhaps this figure, the figure which you may see over here, like by in this year, the investment for organic farmer is like close to 266 million. So that may focus mainly on organic lands which are certified. But still, if you see the broader land which takes organic inputs, be it crop residue, biofertilizer, or whatever, many of the crop and animal residues, byproduct, there would be vast land of area, and this figure appears to me like an indicative. So for us, if we look at how investment goes, we often have more investment in agribusiness, and there are investments more in acquisition of land, and there is less investment in land management, and even less investment in soils. So if you look at investment in soil health, data is really scarce yet. There are some initiatives, and if you look at the approach, some are investing as climate smart agriculture, some are investing as sustainable land management program, some are investing as ISFL, some are investing as conservation agriculture, some are investing as regenerative. So these are like approaches which we see, and these investments come from civil society. And I just have tried to jot down some of the positive efforts from UNDP, FAO, and some private donations like BMJF, who are really more focused on soil health and who are really investing a lot. And these are like indicatives. So at last, when we come to farmers, we need to have policies focused on farmers, not only smallholder farmers, but also landowners or landlords in Africa. We need to have extension policies which promote them, from training, awareness creation to even input supply and so on. efforts in last mile distribution in one way or another would, promote soil health. To your surprise, what we have to see is, an holistic investment. If a development bank, say, invests in infrastructure, in a railway, in one way or another, it reduces, distribution cost. So that will promote soil health. So I think policies has to be, diverse, but contextualized. But what I would like to indicate to you is, it's good to look at some of, compensation policies. If a farmer does well, if the soil organic carbon increases, if soil health increases, then there has to be some compensation policy. There has to be some means to benefit them. So that's how we can promote, ecosystem services. So having talked about soil health, what I should stress and what I would like to share with you is the challenge of soil health is not only, depletion of nutrients. It's not only declining quality of soil. It's not only, lack of nutrients or pollution, but if a soil health is lacking, then farmers cannot benefit from, any improved rate, any improved agronomic practice. So it's really a serious bottleneck which has to be focused. So in summary, we have to focus on how to undertake policy needs. We need to have, awareness creation session. We need to advocate for that. We need to have, how to enforce that. And there are different options to promote soil health with policy. It can focus on extension, finance, and so on. So there are different programs, research, extension investment, which we can see. And the picture over here, which I have brought to you, is like, these are women in West Africa who are now working on microdosing. This is one of the technology which has been even more promoted by different partners like AGRA. And IFDC is currently doing that a lot, and a lot also has been done. So many of the policies we have, many of the programs we have, the development program has to focus on that. So on promoting some innovative practices, say in focusing on efficient use of fertilizer and so on. So that's how we have to go. And, if a government supports a private sector investment in soil, then indirectly, it's like that's like promoting the soil health. So my last slide would focus on recommendation. Having seen some of the literatures, what I see is there is really a scarce literature in focusing on, say, economics of soil health, and it's good to examine some gaps and work on that. Equally, it's wise to work with farmers on the 4 Rs, which Dr. Zingore already indicated. Many of government, intergovernmental agencies, they have a role really in developing, promoting, supporting countries, in supporting their action plans. Even governments have a role in enforcing their laws and so on. These are some of the areas. What I would see is, private sector is more encouraged if there are, supports in some way. That could be, it could be undertaking some study, investment, feasibility studies by civil society and donors. That would promote. I can mention a case for you in that context. Say, the existence of potash deposit, its importance has already been stated by IFDC back, in 80s. With support from USAID in Ethiopia, and at some point private sector has come up and is planning to work on that. So these are some of the ways where one can support the other, and the issue of policy is not what we only leave to farmers or researchers, but also to civil society and government at different levels. So these are some of the literature. And finally, I should appreciate really support given to me from Douglas Kerr, Kalin, and Patrice, who come up and link me with and come with this little slide. And thank you so much for your attention.
All right, thank you very much, Doctor. I think from your presentation, it's quite clear that we need some holistic and targeted investments, and not just investments targeted at one particular area, but a holistic view of investments. Each person has a role to play. There has to be policy enabling environment that encourages private sector investments within each country. And also maybe perhaps in the discussion for the Soil Summit coming, I think one of the key areas was looking at creating a fund that will be that will promote or that will support the running or achieving some of those targeted the targets that we'll be setting for ourselves at the country level, and also looking at financing of fertilizer and agricultural inputs in general. So definitely there is a huge correlation between adoption, proper management, or even efficiency of fertilizer use and availability of fertilizer, and also financing. And then also, if you look at the adoption of the farmer engagements as well, I'm happy to see you highlighting some of the key examples of private sector taking the lead and doing these kinds of initiatives that are more farmer facing. And those are some of the things that we also need to look at, is how do we formulate some of these interventions that are more farmer facing, and that would be able to push more for farmers to be able to adopt these kind of practices at their farmer level, but then in a very simplified way that is easy for them to continue to practice. So thank you very much for your presentation. I'll move to Liesel, if you can kindly take up from here. Thank you. I see that there are some hands up. Please, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Kindly click on that, and then please do share your questions. And we would be moving into, once Liesel is done, we'll move into the Q&A session. So please keep sending in your questions right now, so we can be able to take we can be able to maximize the discussion slot that we have later on. Thank you.
Thanks, Aisha. It's quite nice actually to present at the end after two excellent presentations, and both presenters have mentioned a couple of things that that I want to repeat. So I will talk more about broad principles in terms of enhancing soil health for resilient agriculture. And just to start with, I can get my slide to move. There we go. So just a bit of context in terms of why this is important is that since the year 2000, at least in sub-Saharan Africa, we know Shami mentioned extensification in agriculture. So most of the increase in agricultural production growth has actually been due to expansion of croplands into grazing lands and forest lands, whereas only 25% of the increase in agricultural production actually came from improved crop yields on the same area of land. And we know that this is to a large extent due to soil degradation, and Shami also mentioned the figure of about 65% of croplands in Africa being degraded. And this is also exacerbated by deforestation and overgrazing and degradation of grazing lands, especially in the context of African agriculture. And then there are also some inherent soil limitations which affect the efficiency of fertilizer use, as Shami also mentioned. So overall, in the context of fertilizers especially, we've already heard that reduction in soil health affects the fertilizer use efficiency. And we also see this reflected to an extent in terms of the area of agricultural land in Africa that's being sustainably managed. So as part of Agenda 2063, there was a target for the first 10 years of implementation, which ends this year in 2023, to have at least 30% of agricultural land sustainably managed. But we see that by the last reporting period of 2021, we'd only reached 8.2% from a baseline of 4.8. So we haven't made that much progress in terms of agricultural land that's sustainably managed. And again, we see that reflected also in the numbers of degraded soils and croplands, which doesn't even mention the degradation in grazing lands and so on. So this just confirms that we have a lot of work to do. So what does this then mean in terms of resilient agriculture, and what does that actually mean? And basically, if agriculture is resilient, it means that it can adapt to and recover from various shocks and negative impacts. And those shocks and negative impacts can be from environmental sources. They can also be economic, social, or even institutional. But I want to focus on the environmental shocks and impacts in terms of healthy soil specifically. because that is where the main impact lies. And then we've been talking a lot about soil health, and that there's a lot more recognition of its importance from the donor community, within the decision-making community, within the implementation community, and so on. And for example, in the Soil Initiative for Africa framework that I mentioned, and also the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan that Shami mentioned, the broad definition of soil health is that the soil is able to continuously function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains not only plants, but also animals and humans through the plants that we consume. But that is still a very broad definition that doesn't really tell us much. So if we look at it in terms of fertilizer use efficiency context, there are a number of soil properties that affect fertilizer use efficiency. Again, Shami went into this a lot. And if we look at that, then a very simple representation of soil, what soil health entails, is there on the right. And soil health is much more complex than this, and there are many other factors that are included. But I just want to use this to illustrate the general point. So we heard a lot on the right here about organic matter or organic carbon, and how important that is also in terms of combining mineral fertilizers with organic matter inputs. And these organic matter inputs either come from the residues of after harvesting, the residues from crops, or it can come from external sources like compost and biochar and many other sources. But it's very important to maintain adequate levels of organic matter in the soil. And that then supports soil biology of various sources, because many microbes use organic matter as a source of fuel and nutrients. And then both organic matter and soil biology, especially fungi in the soil, then contribute to improving soil structure by aggregating soil particles together, which then improves the physical health of soil. And this improved soil structure then can improve the water holding capacity of the soil, and also the water infiltrability, or the ability for water to infiltrate into the soil when the soil structure is a bit looser. And all of these combined then can improve the nutrient availability to the plants, because nutrients need to be dissolved in water and be in the plant root zone for roots to take them up. So good structure and water holding capacity and water in the soil is essential for nutrient uptake. And all of this then can enhance crop growth and yield, and then the cycle continues from there. So briefly, just looking at what are some of the ways to improve soil health. And there are a number of principles. Sometimes people focus on 3, sometimes on 5, sometimes on more. But broadly, the first 3 in black, firstly keeping the soil covered, whether it's through mulching or through cover crops or through artificial means. It's very important to provide shade on the one hand, to prevent water from evaporating from the soil surface, and also to provide a barrier, an uneven surface on the soil to reduce the runoff of water and hold water more in the area where we want it to infiltrate. And then minimizing soil disturbance through reduced or no tillage practices. Also very important, because as soon as the soil is disturbed and tilled, the soil is exposed to oxygen and often to higher temperatures, which then increases the decomposition of organic matter. And then on the right-hand side here, we will see, we saw what Shami presented of how fast organic matter declines at the beginning of cultivating natural areas. So minimizing the soil disturbance in that process is a very important factor. And then maximizing plant biodiversity, or biodiversity in terms of plant structure. And this can happen also in various ways depending on the context. So it can be through cover cropping, through crop rotation, especially with legumes is important in terms of additional fertility and bringing in the nitrogen fixing properties. Also agroforestry, nitrogen fixing trees and so on. And these 3 principles in black are then also the 3 principles for conservation agriculture, which many of you will be familiar with. Then the two in blue comes more from the regenerative agriculture philosophy, which looks at maximizing the presence of living roots throughout the year, also in the off seasons, and cover crops and things like that play a role there. Also with the idea that the more that there are living roots in the system, the living roots also provide nutrients in the soil for microbes, which keeps the biology side going and just keeps the whole living ecosystem going throughout the year. And then integrating livestock as well. And I find this interesting because I think in the context of African agriculture, livestock is often already integrated into crop production through cultural practices, whether it's livestock grazing on the crop rests and so on. It could be sometimes more managed, sometimes less managed, but it's a very important key to bring in livestock and managing it effectively, also to improve soil health, also in terms of urine and manure addition and so on. And then very importantly, soil health is a very broad and complex concept, but it's really important to consider the local context as well. And I think this was also reflected well in one of Shami's almost last slides, where especially in non-responsive soils, local adaptation of the various tools of mineral fertilizer, organic matter, and so on, and improved seeds were improved even more with local adaptation. And in terms of soil health, especially in Africa, it's really important to consider the local context in terms of the soil degradation, the capacity of the land users, whoever they might be, to make adaptive management decisions, and also what the context is in terms of the availability of different inputs, improved seeds, organic matter, organic fertilizers, mineral fertilizers. And the fact that we understand clearly that it's not just about either mineral, organic fertilizers and other things, it's really about the best combination of what is available using the integrated soil fertility management principles and so on. So then in terms of the environmental shocks, I want to look at that sort of in terms of the climate change threats to soil, and the three main ones that affect agriculture, especially in Africa, is increasing temperatures, erratic rainfall, and extreme weather events, either as floods or droughts or both. And we've seen a lot of countries experience this more regularly. So if we think of the principles that I just mentioned in terms of how to improve soil health and how this then affects climate change, both adaptation, resilience, and mitigation, is first of all, in terms of climate change, adaptation, and resilience, if we keep the soil covered, we reduce the soil disturbance, we keep living roots in the soil, we have as much plant diversity as possible and so on. All of this can reduce water runoff in the case of floods, so that first of all, we have less soil erosion, so less degradation. And we also have more time for water to be in the area where we want it to infiltrate. And with improved soil structure, as I mentioned, we have a higher chance of the water actually infiltrating into the soil and staying there once the rain subsides and the temperatures increase again, or we have drier spells. And actually I saw, well, there's a common figure often used to say soil, or the food that we eat is produced from, or 95% of the food we eat is produced from soil, where the other 5% comes from water sources in terms of fish and water vegetables and so on. I also saw today a figure saying that African agriculture, 90% of African agriculture relies on water-fed agriculture, so no irrigation. And I think, I don't know how accurate that figure is, but I think it just highlights the importance of having healthy soils, especially in terms of water management and making sure that we have water in our croplands for, at least for crop production. Then in terms of climate change mitigation, again, the increase in organic matter can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And again, by keeping the soil covered and minimizing the soil disturbance, that organic matter can then be kept in the soil, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And in some cases, it's not so easy, but can also increase carbon sequestration, which then through plants and photosynthesis can remove some carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And then this carbon cycling is also one of the ecosystem services of healthy soils. And then in terms of resilient agriculture, healthy soils can improve soil fertility and productivity and the sustainable production of healthy food. With healthy soils, then the addition of micronutrients that are essential for human and animal nutrition would also be more effective in terms of plant uptake. And overall, then this increases the production resilience to subsequent climate shocks, whether those are, again, floods, droughts, and so on. And then as a last slide, also borrowing from Shami, who mentioned what's the priority outcomes under the Africa Fertilizer and Soil Health Action Plan. What I want to highlight here is there are 4 priority areas in the Soil Initiative for Africa framework, which I mentioned is a long-term framework to address soil health in Africa. And this first one emphasizes the need to optimize integrated soil health and water management, planning and implementation across landscapes and agricultural subsectors. And I want to highlight this because even though we're talking predominantly about cropland agriculture, the solutions for improved soil fertility and agricultural resilience is not only in croplands, but it's also in grazing lands and forests. So the better we improve soil health, reduce overgrazing and improve cover and reduce water runoff in grasslands, the better the effect will be on water and soil management in croplands. And the same with forests. Trees have a tremendous role to play in reducing erosion from forest lands, which then often impacts grazing and croplands. So this integrated nature of African agriculture and soil health is critically important. And then the other 3 have been mentioned by both Shami and Dr. Dakar, to look at the human, institutional, and social capital in terms of sustainable soil management, looking at data and information for effective planning and monitoring, and then also the policy, legal, and regulatory frameworks to support this improvements in soil health. With that, thank you, Nana Aisha. Back over to you.
Thank you very much. On this note, I'd encourage everybody to try to use your Q&A tab to ask questions. We do have some comments and questions that I'd like to share. Gary Klugman had shared that fertilizer is only one component of addressing crop yield. However, continued usage has resulted in macronutrient fixation, not bioavailability to crops. He further says that increasing C content and microbial activities over time also allows for increased organic matter, reducing the reliance on traditional fertilizers. So he asked a question to say, how do we interact with our African colleagues to establish production hubs in Africa, especially looking at these kinds of different options of reintroducing possibly microbial based products to augment inorganic fertilizer. So I'll use that as a starting point for the discussion among the panelists, and whilst we get all the questions in. Thank you. So Dr. Shami, Liesl, Dr. Bebe, are these things that, or is this something that you would like to comment on?
Yes, let me start. Yeah, I think maintaining the right levels of organic matter is certainly a critical part of sustainable soil health management. And I think, as I highlighted in my presentation, it's not either or. We need the complementarity between fertilizers, but also some of the organic resource-based technologies. I think the key question is, how do we interact and create a network that can support the production, right? And I think there's need for innovation there is need for ensuring that we are relevant to the context of farmers, and also the organic products that are produced of good quality and actually effective in the very complex conditions that we work with, and that we have quite a lot of issues with the effectiveness of some of the alternatives to fertilizers.
Thank you, Dr. Shami. One of the things that as AFAB engaging and trying to also encourage more organic-based companies on the continent is the access to raw material for these companies, is also the quality of the products that they have, and even the management of these products at the agro-dealer level. Because we are looking at the distribution channel, you need to look at how do they manage these products to ensure efficiency and even the survival of these microbial basis throughout the distribution channel. So it has to be a process of us really looking at what can work and how do we encourage those to work. Liesl and Dr. Bebe, is this something that you'd like to also, or you have any comments about?
Thanks, Aisha. Yeah, I'll just briefly reply to the first point about fertilizer being only one component of addressing crop yields, but continued use can result in macronutrient fixation and not being available. I think that's very important also in the context of soil health, and I think that's again why context is very important. And I would use the example of phosphate, for example, which in many soils is not available because the soil is too acidic. And that's where the local context is really important to understand that if a soil is on the acidic side, then applied phosphate fertilizers are going to have limited efficiency if it's bound in the soil because of pH levels. So then considering liming and other options would be important. And linked to that, if one knows a soil is acidic, for example, then it's important to look at the nitrogen sources applied. So if one then uses ammonium gas or urea fertilizers, that's going to worsen the soil acidity as well. So it's really important to look at the context and understand beforehand what minerals or what nutrients are available in the soil, and whether they are available to the plants or not, and then adjust the fertilization and the management accordingly. Over.
Yes, let me add on what was said. To me, like, to make things very general, technology as a whole has got like the good and bad side. If you have a gun to use, you can use to protect yourself, but if you kill your relative and so on, that's a misuse. So that's true to fertilizer. Fertilizer basically, tries to address the balance between input and output. So basically, because we are taking biomass out of land mass, we are really depleting the natural resource, land as a whole. So there has to be an input in some way. Well, we believe there are side effects. Fixation is good, as indicated with acid soil is quite common. Well, using the right type of fertilizer would address that, as liming could be another, but even using adaptive crop would address the issue. But thinking of working on fertilizer use efficiency is one area where we can address. Well, I agree with the comment given. Microbial source, microbial fertilizer like biofertilizers, others, fertilizers of plant and animal origin are really good and appropriate. But in this or that way, what we have to see is it's good to see the local context as it was said, but fixation problems are there, but there are also techniques to address that. So taking scientific recommendations based on the nature of soil, crop, and agro-ecosystem would be one way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's a question directed to you, Dr. Bebe. Is a question about how or what are the options to address the increasing soil acidity, especially in Ethiopia? What are some of the things that can be done, or in soil management practices that can be implemented to combat or tackle the increasing trend in acidic soils in Ethiopia? Maybe once you answer, we can also ask the other panelists to also contribute.
Yes, yeah, we know in Ethiopia, acidity is a serious problem. It has come to attention of government and quite good. We have a declaration in connection with that, the Bonga Declaration. So this is an case in point reflecting how policies are driving, development option. One most important tool we have is basically liming. Lime inputs from calcium carbonate. This alkali earth metal elements are inputs which can reduce acidity. So we can reduce acidity, especially the severe one, using lime. So this is an option which we have, but different types of soils have different liming requirements. So depending on the type of lime, its fineness, content, the calcium carbonate equivalent varies actually. So reviewing those literature, available documents, making use of those recommendations, an important option. That's number one option, which I can keep. In fact, this is a long-age problem, and this has come as a result of the weathering we have. This is quite common in high rainfall areas. Somehow there are, local. I often hear that there are local crops which are adaptive to, medium. There are what is called, acid-loving crops or acid tolerant. So making use of those would also be an option. But coming to lime, the investment, the amount of inputs we give to the soil could be too much. That may discourage people, but in a way, if I have to link with my slide, a government can come with, some incentive for, in supporting the transportation, last mile distribution and so on. These are the options. So with that approach, it's possible to address the solution. But equally, I do see that there are countries who have taken advantage of, addressing problem of acidity, but taking lessons from those countries, like the South American, Brazil. Taking lessons from them would be also another option. So these are in brief, some of the immediate solutions which I can suggest. Thank you.
And I think also in Liesel's presentation, she did highlight some of the practices that can support in improving soil health, and then also promoting soil nutrition recommendation. I'll give this opportunity to Shami and to Liesel to see if they wanted to contribute, especially because this is not just a case of case in peculiar to Ethiopia. I think in sub-Saharan Africa, we're seeing gradually this trend of acidity in the soil. As AFAB under Sustain, we've also just carried out a soil acidity sort of like a pilot project in Tanzania, where we're looking at how do we come up with models that can support this correction of these acidic soils. So over to you, Liesel and Shami.
Shami, please go ahead. I saw you were ready.
Yeah. Dr. Shami, I think Liesel is asking you to take the lead.
All right.
Yeah,
sure. Soil acidity is a growing challenge. The ultimate solution is to provide adequate liming solutions, because that's the only effective way that we can, address soil acidity at scale. And the challenge is the cost and the logistics of applying large amounts of lime tends to be prohibitive. So incentives that allow farmers to invest in liming is very critical. But having said this, I just want to underscore that there's currently very inconsistent shown that in some of the acidic soils, we get very low response to lime. And we have to think more about effective acidity, which just doesn't focus on pH, but also on aluminum toxicity, which tends to drive a large part of the diminished crop response. So priorities have to go into low pH soils with high aluminum toxicity, and then we can prioritize that. And then more from an integrated management perspective, approaches that allow us to improve organic soil organic matter actually help us to buffer soil pH, but that tends to be a stopgap measure, especially when you're dealing with extremely acidic soil conditions already.
Right, thank you very much. All too soon, the conversation is just heating up, but we've come to an end of our session. I'll give each speaker the opportunity for a 3-minute closing remark. And please do continue to send in your questions and comments. We will try as much as possible to have each of the speakers address them whilst we in the preparation of the report that will be shared through the AFAB newsletters that come weekly to you. So please continue to engage as we have the closing remarks. So since Shami, you're on the floor, I'll just give you the opportunity to go first.
All right, thanks very much. I just wanted to conclude by highlighting that we have a growing crisis of land degradation. And one comment that we didn't address that was actually focusing on what do we need to do to build on some of the work, for example, that Pauline Chivenga did on this degradation prospect. One key knowledge gap is how to actually design effective solutions that allow us to rehabilitate degraded soils affected by chemical, biological, physical land degradation processes. We don't yet have a good understanding of some of the effective and viable solutions that could actually allow farmers to rehabilitate, degrade soils, and improve soil health. So that's a major issue that we need to address. And I think our presentation is given some of the potential opportunities for us to do that. And as we look at efforts to increase productivity through fertilizer, it has to be counterbalanced by soil health management, in particular by ensuring that we have the right organic matter-based technologies that allow us to address that part of part of the equation. And then I just wanted to also emphasize that fertilizer remains a critical ingredient, especially when you're dealing with depleted nutrients. A lot of the organic matter technologies are based on growing organic resources. And to grow those organic resources, you still need nutrients. So I just wanted to emphasize that complementary of fertilizer and organic will remain fundamental. It's not an either-or situation. And we normally get polarized by debate of either-or, but we need to make sure that we maximize on the complementarity of fertilizers and organic-based technologies.
Thank you very much. So Liesl, I'll give you this opportunity to make your closing remarks.
There's so much to say. I want to actually link up with one of the comments in the Q&A section about the role of the private sector, and that there are quite a number of private sector agencies that are doing a lot. And I think, was it Dr. Daka that also mentioned public-private, or you, Nanaisha, I can't remember, someone mentioned public-private partnerships. And that's really important. It links to the discussion about soil acidity. Again, it's really important to also understand, even in terms of subsidies, to make sure that whatever fertilizers are provided through subsidies, to make sure that they are not enhancing soil acidity, for example, and possibly looking at how liming products can be provided as part of subsidy services even though, as Shami mentioned, the transport and the logistic costs are high, again, maybe that's something that one can link up with the private sector on, about in terms of supporting the last mile delivery of the products that are needed. And the whole, I want to reiterate again that we are emphasizing cropland soil health and productivity at the moment, but I just want to emphasize again, also linked to what Dr. Daka was presenting about land tenure and how that can be an incentive for improved management. And just saying that there are also examples of working with communities as a whole and having community or watershed natural resource management committees, which put land management decisions in the palms and the ownership of the communities themselves, which then enhances the ability of individual farmers and households to make improved management decisions that are supported by the larger community. I think that's a very important part of incentives moving forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Daka.
Yeah, thank you all. It's been a pleasure to be with you. We all understand the challenge of land degradation, the problem of addressing soil health. This is really a core point where we have to know how to address the issue. But this is not what we leave to researchers and development practitioners. This has to come to agenda of policymakers. Civil society has to do well in it. Above all, I would say, donors, especially intergovernmental agencies, has to focus more on this issue. I would encourage them more, to come with action point, policy framework, or roadmap. And some of these documents are already available. If not, they can come institutionally on that regard. We as IFDC have really unique competence, even in coming with some specific problem to formulate fertilizer and so on. We have, fertilizer plants in the US, and we have some lab facilities. So if we come and align according to our competencies, we have the room to address, this critical gap, especially in African context. And really, this is high time, because we are like a country who imports fertilizer, who imports food, and this is really quite a double problem, So this is where we have to align. I hope we'll continue to work together to reach end users, the smallholder farmers. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So for me, I'll just reiterate some of the main highlights from the conversations that we've had. Is the need for us to begin to push the agenda for integrated soil fertility management, issues around holistic investments, around inputs in general, but also looking at soil health. We need to also focus on extension, investing in R&D, research and development. Most of the time, we seem to forget that in the discussions around integrated soil fertility management and soil health, we do not highlight or emphasize the role of research and the RECs in the discussion. But I think most of the decisions that are made have to be influenced by the research and research outcomes. So this is something that we need to look at. In terms of investment as well, there has to be a huge a relook again at how the investments are made, the suitability in terms of local context, and also there is a role for each and every one of us to play in this discussion. Going into the soil health and fertilizer summit next year, we also need to look at how prepared governments are, how prepared the country are, how prepared stakeholders are to begin to adapt the outcomes of these the summit, and also how ready they would be to operationalize it, the outcomes. So those are the things that we also have to keep in mind as we go. There has to be a key emphasis placed on policy enabling environment, and the role of private sector in this entire chain is minimized, but has to be at the forefront of all of the discussions that we are having. So thank you very much for making time to join us today. We have a second, we have our last webinar that's supposed to happen next week. I hope you'd all make time to join us. My name is Danaisha Mohammed, and it was a pleasure hosting you all. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.